Cool. So, start with the first question. Over a given period of time, how much waste does the Unity College Sustainability Center receive? Like, let's say in a month, about
Yeah.
how much waste?
In a month, I'd have to divide that out. In a year, I can give you a quote. So last year, in 2013, we basically produced about 200,000 pounds, or about 100 tons of material. And of that material, we had about 62% of it, roughly 60-ish% of it, was landfill waste. And the rest, about 41 or 42%, was recycled material.
Just give me an estimate. Like, how much waste do you think is put into the trash that could be recycled? Like, is there students just drinking a Coke in their room and throwing it in the trash can instead of recycling it?
Yeah, we did a study on that in the past, just looking at which residence hall was producing the cleanest trash or the dirtiest trash. But we did it anyway because we wanted to get a sense of what were we missing, and some of the residence halls did a good job, but in general, I think we saw 20% of the material could have been in the recycling. Yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah.
All right. Well, we'll go on to another question.
Mm-hmm.
So with all the recycled plastic, like everything that we collect here and send off to be sorted wherever, what ends up happening to all of that?
Okay, so in the past, we sent it to a regional recycling center, which is just in Thorndike, but that meant that we had to sort it out ourselves. And when it went there, basically the way that waste works, recovered waste works, is that as long as it's sorted, it's worth something. So number 2 plastic is worth something to be repurposed or reused into something else. And left unsorted just as trash, it usually just ends up in the landfill. It's not worth anything. So as you're sorting it, you're putting the value back into it, and then it's worth something on a commodities market. And so a lot of our plastics, I assume, went down south, and 2 things could have happened with those plastics. They could have been remade into new bottles or new plastic containers. And from the best sense I get is that number 1 and number 2 plastics, that's pretty easy to do with. The rest of the plastics, so 3 through 7, tend to get downcycled, which means they just get turned into, like rubber.
So what about the waste that doesn't actually get recycled, like the waste that people just throw out without thinking about it? So if that, does that just wind up in a landfill, or
Yes.
can it wind up in waterways, or just cause general pollution and stuff?
Yeah, so all of our waste landfill trash goes to Orange Walk, which is about 50 minutes north of here. And next, in December, we're actually going to do a trip up there with a couple students that are doing a project just to look at it. But it's a big facility. It's basically a pile of trash that's 3 times the size of Unity College campus. And I don't know, probably 100 feet tall. Yeah, has a very big impact on the area.
Some of the information we're looking at is trying to figure out how trash gets from being produced to being in our hands, and then eventually we're trying to figure out how it gets to the North Pacific Gyre. That's kind of the focus here, because obviously we've got all these systems in place to take care of our trash for us and to recycle it and to make sure it's taken care of properly, but still such a large amount of waste just gets dumped wherever. I mean, even a landfill, you can consider that properly disposing, because what else are you going to do with it? But so much of it just gets littered, and you see it strewn across the road, and eventually it winds up in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah. When you look at our impact, the way that I try to think of solving the problem is to go to its source, and the source is the fact that it was used, or the fact that it was created in the first place. There's a lot of containers out there that never needed to be made. They were overpackaged in the first place, or they didn't need to be consumed. And so, that's the problem is that once you create this stuff, it's hard to get rid of it. Even with recycling, which, there's definitely a really big effort to recycle more stuff, and more material is getting repurposed into things, and that's great. But if we cut the problem off at its source and say, as consumers say, do we even really need to produce this in the first place? That's I think that could be our biggest gain.